everybody, welcome in to Next Round Preps. Mankind, the cool Viking here with you as we record this on Halloween. I've already taken most of my costume off, but Jerry's in the spirit.
John, I'll tell you look pretty scary, man.
Got my long flowing locks
Yeah,
like
I
Mankind
saw you walk
has.
in on the Next Round crowd earlier today, and yeah, you were kind of intimidating.
I had Sacco and I had my chair. I was ready to beat people with it, but yeah, this is really uncomfortable, so I'm going to take it off here in a second. But yeah, it is the final week of the high school football season.
Oh, yeah, that's why we're here, by the way.
That typically means Halloween. Surprisingly, actually pushed back a week this year. I really don't know why the AHSA did that because this is usually Halloween week. A lot of teams will play on Thursday because they'll do like citywide trick-or-treating on Friday and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then that means the semifinals are on Thanksgiving. Now the third round is in Thanksgiving. And the 7A championship is all the way at December 7th now. So, I mean, everything's been pushed back a lot. I really don't know why they did that. But now we are here at Halloween. Instead of talking about the playoffs, we're moving forward to week 10, the final week of the regular season, and a lot of non-region play. A couple of big region games in those 9-team regions, but I got to take this off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I figured you would. You know, John, while you're doing that, there were some big games this past week that decided a whole lot. And, you know, we're going to start off with one of them right off the bat.
Yeah, we are. And I heard a lot of talk about this game. Obviously didn't get to see it. We were calling the Thompson game. I got random here. There. Highland Home, the Flying Squadron, taking on Reeltown. Had to go to Reeltown in this one. Reeltown gets a big win, though.
Boy, they do. They had a great season. They ended up, 9-0, undefeated. They'll be playing Wicksburg, easy for me to say, in the playoffs. Last time these two teams met, John, all the way back in 1965. They've only met one time, and that was back in 65. And Reeltown beat them 33-0. So if you harboring a grudge for what is that, like 50-something years or whatever?
It's a long one to harbor.
Right. So in the playoffs, Wicksburg will get a chance to do it. But Reeltown, great season as they handle Highland Home. Highland Home only one defeat on the season as well.
Yeah, Highland Home will be second there in 2A Region 3 behind Reeltown. Still finished 9-1 in the season, 6-1 in region play. All right, moving up to Class 3A for the 3A Region 1 title. Thomasville and Mobile Christian. Mobile Christian, pound for pound, one of the best teams in the state this year. They get a big win, 45-14 in this one. Up in 4A, had a bunch of region title games we talked about last week, kind of previewing. Region 2, Montgomery Catholic taking it to Andalusia, 27-14. Once again, two of the better teams in the state, both coming in unbeaten to that game. Montgomery Catholic gets a big win there over Andalusia. Montgomery Catholic looking to win a 4A state title there. American Christian, they beat Montevallo 18-6. Montevallo had a chance to tumble out with a loss. It was for second place. ACA, they end up locking up second place there in that region. Gulf Shores and Viger. Viger with that forfeit, a couple forfeits they had early in the season, including a big one to UMS Wright. Gulf Shores, they get a big win over Viger, though, to basically lock that region up 42-12, which now puts Viger, Faith Academy, UMS Wright, BC Rain, and a wild tiebreaker there as UMS Wright also lost this past weekend.
Yeah, and UMS Wright, as you mentioned, they lost. Now they're going to play Williamson, I believe it is, this coming week. So, they have a chance to get a few points there. But, it is a region game, so they can make up a lot with playing Williamson. But, ended up 5-4 on the season. We're not used to seeing that out of a UMS Wright team. Of course, we're not used to seeing some stuff out of a lot of teams, namely Hoover, yeah. But we'll get to that in a minute. But, yeah. So UMS Wright, we'll see how they fare in the playoffs.
Yeah, they have to win to potentially force a tiebreaker. Should a tiebreaker happen because of the Viger loss, actually in an okay position. But Viger and UMS Wright both losing this past weekend to Gulf Shores and Faith Academy, who will likely be your 1 and 2 there in the region. In 5A, John Carroll, big win over Winona. The Dragons falling there 49-35. That means they tumble out of the playoffs. Winona out, Fairfield in at that 4 spot. John Carroll will be number 3 in that region behind Pleasant Grove and Ramsey. Moody, big win over Southside Gadsden, and because of that, Chase Jackson, our Milo's Player of the Week, had an incredible one-handed interception return for a touchdown. I'm going to try to pull the video there and show it to everybody, but it is an incredible play there. Moody rebounded from the loss to Leeds. They beat Southside Gadsden, tie for the region title. However, because of this tie, Southside Gadsden still likely will win the region. There's a chance that Leeds actually could get up there and potentially win the region, but they have to get a big win this weekend over Centerpoint. We'll talk about that here in a second. But, if that happens, then Moody can move up to number 2. Likely Southside will still be 1. Moody will still be 3 with Leeds at 2. But a big, big win for Moody, and Chase Jackson helping that defense get a big comeback win. And like I mentioned, an incredible pick 6 with a one-handed interception there as Moody beat Southside Gaston 34-21. Russellville, they win the region title over Fairview up in Region 8, 31-14. Not really shocked. Russellville, they're typically in that position.
No, the Golden Tigers, a good football team. I went through Fairview this past week.
Really?
Yeah, so
Russellville, they're always there. That's who I played
right.
in my state championships. They are always a force to be reckoned with there in Class 5A. Saraland, they're all over Theodore. Theodore won this game by a point last year. That was Saraland's last loss. But Saraland getting a big revenge win here to win the region title 42-13 over Theodore. Pike Road, big winners, drove through Pike Road yesterday coming back from Orlando. They win 43-22 over Carver. They're in Montgomery, and they will win the Region 2 championship. Carver will be number 3. In Region 3, the championship for this one still up for grabs coming into this final week, and boy, a couple of crazy results here that I did not expect. I picked both of these the exact opposite going into the week.
Really? You had Briarwood?
No, I'm saying I had Homewood and Helena winning both of these games.
I got you. Okay, well, Homewood, of course, drops to Briarwood 20-13, but only thing I want to say about that is you're going to get good momentum going into the playoffs. You got Jasper this week. Homewood does. Jasper's just not a very good football team. I hate to say that, but
you're wearing a Vikings cap and everything. You're all about Jasper.
That's right. I'm all about Jasper. But so Briarwood, they still got to play Fairhope, by the way.
Yeah,
that's going to be an interesting ball game. They lost last year 44-22, but both teams, Homewood and Briarwood, ended up with the exact same record, 5-4. So. Yeah, I kind of with you on that, John. I thought Homewood would take it. Helena and Benjamin Russell, I was all over Helena. I never expected Benjamin Russell to come up and win that ball game. It was at Benjamin Russell. It is a hard place to play at Veterans Stadium there, but I'm like you. I thought Helena would take it down.
I've been down to Alexander City. I played in that stadium. I know exactly what it's like. And it is tough. But Ben Russell coming up with the win and coming up with the region title that I never would have guessed, because Homewood beat Ben Russell already this season. So Homewood's actually going to drop to 4th. Ben Russell's going to drop to 1st, or move up to 1st. And then Helena and Briarwood will be there at 2 and 3. So all 4 of those teams still making the playoffs. We knew coming in they were going to make the playoffs after Homewood's win over Pelham the week before. But so Ben Russell, Helena, Briarwood, Homewood will be your 4 teams there in that order from Region 3. In Region 4, Hillcrest Tuscaloosa locking things up, 48-21 win over McAdory. Hueytown, they beat Central Tuscaloosa 56-28, and Bessemer City, they beat Paul Bryant 41-12. So as you go over to the brackets there and look how things played out in 6A Region 4, you got Hillcrest, you got Hueytown, you got Bessemer City up all the way up to 3 because they got the win over McAdory early in the season, and then because Central couldn't pull out the win, McAdory will be your 4 seed there. So McAdory getting in, but only barely getting in because of beating Central Tuscaloosa after Central lost to Hueytown this past week. In 6A Region 5, Mountain Brook, they beat Gardendale 56-42. Had Mountain Brook lost this game, and what ended up being a shootout, not typically what you see out of a Mountain Brook game, typically lower scoring with good defense there. Mountain Brook, they could have potentially dropped to 4th had Gardendale won that game. They'll stay up in 2nd. Mortimer Jordan will be the team in between. And Parker is your region champ. And I only had this on here just because it is history in the making. Parker, they beat Huffman 56-0. Huffman, first team to go 10 games without scoring a single point. First game in the playoff era without scoring a single point. It happened the year right before the playoffs with Notasulga. But since the playoffs started there in the mid to late 60s, Huffman did not score a single point. Saw some footage from this game. Obviously, Parker, a really good team. But, kudos to the kids for staying in there, playing hard every week, regardless of the fact that, we all look at that and talk about how they got outscored. It was 580-something to 0. I don't remember what the exact number was. But tough way to end the season there for Huffman. Parker, they are region champs out of Region 5, though, over Mountain Brook, Mortimer Jordan, and Gardendale. Region 6, where Huffman comes from, Oxford, big win over Centerpoint, 35-14 there. The Yellow Jackets lock up the 2nd seed. Centerpoint will be 3rd. And, of course, Clay Chaltville your top dog there. No real shock that Clay Chalkville ends up winning that region. All right, moving into Class 7A, Daphne, big winner over Foley. Foley not making the playoffs this year. Every year we talk about Foley and Prattville. Hey, maybe this is the year they can turn things around, get back. Foley had to win this game to cause a tiebreaker that they then potentially could have made it in, but they lost 57-35. Prattville also not making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I talked to Clark Stewart. He's the play-by-play guy for Foley this past week, and, of course, they're disappointed, obviously, and, of course, I know the guys down at Prattville. They're disappointed. I get it, but you got to – it just seems like they haven't raised their level up yet to the same as Class 7A as they should be. But they're going to stay big schools, so they're going to stay in 7A, so they're going to have to get better.
Yeah, the old 6A days, it was a little different story. But here in 7A, Foley Prattville hadn't quite done it. However, Dothan, school that has merged a few years ago to jump up to the 7A level from 6A, they get a big win over Opelika, knock Opelika out of things. Dothan sitting at a playoff spot right now. Still got another region game this week, but Dothan 38-34 winners over Opelika. Up in Region 4, Florence knocked Spartman out of the playoffs. Kind of a shock here. Spartman, I want to say like 3 weeks ago, was technically playing for what we consider the region title against James Clemens and ended up losing that one. And then they lost. And Florence is going to be the 4th seed. They're going to travel to Thompson there in that first game. Austin, meanwhile, beats Huntsville 52-25 to lock up second. 3 or 4 weeks ago, they weren't even in the playoff discussion because they had a slow start to the season, and they have worked their way up to be number 2 in that region behind James Clemens. So kudos to the Black Bears there up in Decatur playing well in Region 4. In Region 3, the one thing we were kind of sort of keeping an eye on was, could Chelsea potentially beat Hewitt-Trussville? You thought they could potentially pull it off against Hoover.
Yeah. Close
early on. Didn't happen against Hewitt-Trussville.
No, but they stayed close to Hoover, week before last until the second half. But Hewitt-Trussville, a good football team. They're starting to hit their stride right at the right time. They're going to make some noise in the playoffs, mark my words.
Really, the only, quote-unquote, bad games Hewitt's had was against Thompson, didn't play really well, and against Central Phoenix City. Now, that's the top 2 teams in the state when it comes to 7A.
Right.
So, a little more understandable there. And, of course, lost to Spain Park, but, not a game that ended up ultimately mattering for Hewitt-Trussville. Spain Park did get the win 42-17 over Oak Mountain to do their part, but Hewitt had to have lost to Chelsea to make that happen. Although Spain Park, they're sitting at 6-3 on the season right now. The only reason they missed was because of that Hoover loss they had first game of the season. It was 28-20. They had a lot of costly special teams mistakes that if they had won that game, Hoover would have been out of the playoffs after losing to Thompson this past week.
When they played Hoover, they weren't healthy. They were missing 3 or 4 key starters. Now they're back. Look how they're playing. So, Tim Vakakis has done a great job. We knew Spain Park was going to be better. We didn't think so at the first of the year, but now we do. We know. Of course, they really put it on Oak Mountain 42-17.
And just coming out of this season, you got Thompson at the top, obviously. Then you got Hewitt. Vestavia has looked really strong. Vestavia could easily jump up there, be a top team as well, competing with Thompson and Hewitt. But then really going out of this year, we'll see what happens in the playoffs with Hoover, but coming out of this year, coming after the way the season ended, Spain Park's number 4 for me, just in how they've ultimately finished the season. And I know Hoover won on the field, but that was the first region game of the season. This was back in early September when they played. Now things have totally flipped, and Spain Park's coming in maybe as that 4th best team, but they will not make the playoffs despite beating Oak Mountain. Vestavia, they won 45-0 over Tuscaloosa County in a closer game than expected between Thompson and Hoover. This one was 7-3 for a long time, and then the second half, Thompson blew it open, made it 21-3, let Hoover come back and score with 16 seconds left to make it a 10-point game, but big win 21-11 over Hoover.
Yeah, and Trent Seaborn on target to Corbin Landrew on a couple of passes that were just real exciting plays where they thread needle. One time I remember during the game is that Hoover would have had Thompson on 4th down. They elected to take the holding call. I made the statement before that play. I said, I wouldn't have done that. I would have declined the penalty and hoped that Thompson didn't go for it from, I think it was 4 or 5 yards, because you just don't want to give Trent Seaborn another chance. Well, they gave him another chance. He threw 60 yards or thereabouts for a TD to Corbin Landrew, and that's what kind of broke the game open at that point. Hoover got a late touchdown. It was at 18 seconds.
16 seconds left.
16 seconds to go in the game. They scored a fluke touchdown in that. Not fluke, they drove it. But anyway, they got it in there. And then they went for 2 and got it. So that's where the 11 points came from. So basically up until 16 seconds to go in the game, it was 21-3. Thompson well in control as they came out of the locker room for the second half.
Yeah, and Thompson also got it down 1st and 5 in the second half. Didn't score. It got penalty after penalty, backed him up, kept him from getting points on the board, ended up missing a field goal. So, yeah, the game could have been a lot worse, but ultimately Thompson in control of this one. They win 21-11 over Hoover. All right, so that's the week that was. A lot of region championships locked up, a lot of playoff spots locked up. Not a lot of games coming up this week. This is a week that most people have elected to take off. Thompson's off, Hoover's off, Hewitt-Trussville's off. A lot of teams are off here in the Birmingham area we cover, but a few non-region games that are interesting. A couple of region games in those 9-team regions that have kind of, drug things out because you have to. And then, we're pretty much looking ahead to the playoffs. So we'll kind of take a look at the brackets. We'll take a look at all this when we get back. But first, one of our great new sponsors.
Yeah, so if your team's off this week, you got time to do a little extra, and maybe you've been putting off that project that you need to have that deck torn down or that old shed out back torn down and hauled away. Call the folks at Shepherd Equipment. You can go to their website, shepherdequipment.com, SHEPHERD, shepherdequipment.com. Shepherd Equipment and Disposal, they will do all kinds of things. They've got dumpsters in 2 different sizes for both home, residential, and commercial use. You can have one put in your driveway if you want to, or if you own a business, let me encourage you to get in touch with them and find out their prices on dumpsters. Also, if you need a road built or something through your property, maybe you need just to have it bush hogged or some leveling work done, maybe some slag put down on an old dirt road that's got ruts and all that in it where you just want to level it out and make it what it is, these are the people to call. ShepherdEquipment.com. That's where you'll get all the information you need to get a hold of them.
All right, thanks so much to Shepherd Equipment once again for sponsoring Next Round Preps here throughout the football season as we slowly but surely end the regular season. Kind of a lull for a lot of teams this week, but a couple of big games. We'll talk about those when we get back right here on Next Round Preps.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is brain changes that are starting to interfere with your life? Did you know researchers have proven that these brain changes can be slowed down or reversed in many people that routinely exercise their brain? At the Care and Thrive Foundation, we specialize in helping you understand the specific areas of the brain that have changed and develop a brain health plan, including cognitive exercises, adaptive approaches, and helpful technology to proactively stay ahead of your brain wellness. Visit www.careandthrive.org for more information.
We've partnered with Who Is Coffee to create the Next Round Blend, available in light, medium, and dark roast. 100% Arabica beans. Specialty coffee roasted on demand, available in whole bean or ground for drip pods. Espresso and coarse ground for French press. Go to nextround.store to get a link to pre-order today. Everyone that pre-orders will be entered to win a prize pack with coffees, shirts, hats, and tumblers. Nextround.store for the Next Round Blend.
Welcome back in here to Next Round Preps. We talked about the last week of region play for most teams, but now we move ahead to what is officially Week 10, the final week of the regular season. Jerry, we are finally here, and the brackets are, for the most part, set, but still some seeds to be decided out there.
Yeah, but I don't think there'll be any big surprises. Do you? I think pretty much AL Preps is where you got alpreps.com. I think that I'm real comfortable with the teams in the place that you think they are.
Yeah, we kind of go through and do a confidence grade, so I give it either a low, medium, high, and then locked in, obviously, when they're locked in. For the most part, you kind of see where people fall. Now, there's some, third and fourth spots that, you still got to play for. There's some final playoff spots that have to get locked up. The tiebreakers, though, is really where things kind of get interesting because sometimes it's games you just know that, Team X is going to win and Team Y is going to lose, and that's going to ultimately lead to this many points. But you don't want to do it just yet because a lot of times you have rivalry games here in this final slot of the season. This is the kind of thing that when I was in school, we used to always play Vestavia this final week of the season.
Right.
I lost to them more than we beat them, despite the fact that we were winning state championships. We'd step up in classification and end up losing to Vestavia in this week, in this final week of the season. So, some good rivalry games. Some will matter, some won't, other than just pride. But, I give confidence grades based on what I think and what my formulas tell me will happen. But sometimes in these big rivalry games, you throw that out the window, and who on earth knows what's going to happen.
Speaking of big rivalry games, let's start off with T.R. Miller and W.S. Neal. For folks that keep up with high school football, I don't have to say any more than the Battle of Murder Creek. If you know anything about Bruton, Alabama, I always thought it was north and south, but they call the south part of Bruton, as far as I call it the south, they call it East Bruton. East Bruton is where W.S. Neal High School lives. And, of course, in Bruton is where T.R. Miller lives. Now, everybody knows T.R. Miller. They've been one of the winningest programs, if not the winningest program in the state of Alabama for many years. But there's a creek that runs right between them. That's what separates East Bruton and Bruton. The name of that creek is Murder Creek. So when you see and there's all kinds of legends. By the way, I encourage you to Google it because it's quite some interesting stories, not only about this matchup, but about the legend of Murder Creek. But you can imagine what's on there. But anyway, that's always a rivalry, and that's going to be a great ball game.
And so you bring that up, which is one of these tiebreakers that you do have to pay attention to because W.S. Neal, they're locked in the playoffs already. They can't move. They're the 3 seed in 3A Region 1. But T.R. Miller not locked in. Currently, I have them in at number 2, but T.R. Miller, Bayside Academy, St. Michael, all tied at 5 and 2. They're all in the playoffs, so you're not going to miss the playoffs necessarily, but everybody's trying to get that coveted number 2 spot because that means you're at home for the first round of the playoffs. 3-way tie. Right now, St. Michael, they're sitting at 5. Non-region defeated opponent. It's complicated. When I say a number, that's how many wins the teams they beat this season in non-region play have total. So St. Michael sitting at 5. T.R. Miller sitting at 3. Bayside Academy sitting at 2. Now, St. Michael can only add 1, so they'll be at 6 at the most. Bayside Academy can add 7. T.R. Miller can also add 7 because they play W.S. Neal, who has 6 wins on the season. If they beat W.S. Neal, they will likely win this tiebreaker over St. Michael and Bayside Academy, which they are not currently winning. If they lose, and if Bayside Academy loses to Alabama Christian, St. Michael will get that second spot. So T.R. Miller definitely needs to go beat W.S. Neal in this rivalry game, so that shows how much more important it is.
Well, T.R. Miller for years usually always one classification larger than W.S. Neal, so over the years that's been a kind of a given. Even this rivalry game, it may end up being 7-6. It's always close like that, 13-14 type game, but yeah, T.R. Miller's got to win it. We know that they have the ability to do it. We'll see if they can get it done.
In 5A, Southside Gadsden, we talked about Moody leads. Southside Gadsden, Moody got the upset win over Southside this past week. I don't know if I necessarily called it an upset win. All 3 of those teams really good. Southside leads and Moody. Southside Gadsden has Etowah this week. Etowah only has 3 wins on the season. Southside sitting at 7 and 2. However, Southside wins this game. They lock up the region championship no matter what because they get 3 extra wins added to it. Moody and Leeds are far behind. Moody actually needs to hope Southside loses and Leeds wins over Center Point, which that game, by the way, we're just going to talk about that too because I'm sitting right here next to it. Yeah. That's another big game because Center Point, strong 6A team as well.
Absolutely, and Leeds can win this team. Leeds playing good football, and they can win this game. But George Bates, Center Point, you gotta think that they're going to handle business, even though they travel to Leeds. Of course, they're already in the playoffs. They'll play Hartsville, I believe, in that round. And it's yet to be determined what Leeds, like you said, is going to do.
Yeah, you look at the 5A bracket as it stands right now. So those 3 teams are not set. So as it stands right now, Southside, Leeds, Moody all tied. Southside Gadsden sitting at 9 wins. Moody at 4, Leeds at 2. Leeds will add 7 with Center Point, which will vault them up to 9. Plus Pell City and Sylacauga can still add a win as well. Moody cannot win this tiebreaker. However, if Leeds ends up winning it by beating Center Point, Southside Gadsden loses to Etowah, and then Hoax Bluff and Boaz don't win, and either Pell City or Sylacauga does win, super complicated, but still possible, and we've seen stranger things happen, then Leeds will jump up to number 1. Moody will be number 2 because the head-to-head win over Southside Gadsden, and Southside will drop down all the way to number 3. But Southside Gadsden at Etowah, if they beat Etowah, Southside would lock it up, and then it won't really matter what happens with Leeds and Center Point, but like you mentioned, Center Point, they're a playoff team. Leeds are going to be a playoff team regardless. And yeah, George Bates wants to go on the road and get a big win here over Leeds. Theodore St. Paul's, this is a region game. In Region 1, a lot of these Mobile regions have 9 teams in them, especially in 6A. Now that Theodore has dropped down, McGill-Tulane has dropped down, St. Paul's has moved up. They'll probably drop down depending on what happens in the playoffs this year. But Theodore at St. Paul's, the winner in this one is 3rd. The loser is 4th. Both of them are in the playoffs, though, in 6A Region 1. We talked about Center Point and how they ultimately finished. Oxford beat them to get the 2nd seed. They travel to Jacksonville, an interesting 4A, 6A matchup.
It really is. This is just a rivalry game, folks. There's no other way. I mean, it doesn't mean anything other than, can Oxford and Jacksonville. Jacksonville's 8-1 on the season, by the way. Of course, Oxford's 7-2. So a good matchup. Could be one of the best games, closest games in the state right there.
And Oxford finishing second in that region because Clay Chalville. Clay Chalville is in that region, so Clay is the number one team coming out of Region 6, Oxford 2, Center Point 3. Muscle Shoals at Spartman. I mentioned Spartman. They tumbled out of the playoffs, kind of a big fall. They were sitting at number 2 for a long time, even tied for number 1. They fall out of the playoffs. Muscle Shoals, they win 6A Region 7. They go on the road to Spartman, try to finish off an undefeated season here at 9-0. Hartselle, they are at Bob Jones. Hartselle 7-2 of the season. Bob Jones 5-4. However, Bob Jones, the 3rd seed in this region, have the same overall record as Spartman, but they're going to be the 3 seed out of Region 4. Hartselle, the 2 seed out of that region behind Muscle Shoals. So another good North Alabama matchup there. Ben Russell at Valley. We talked about Ben Russell winning the region last week over Helena. Valley, number 2 in 5A Region 4. So a good matchup there between 2 7-2 teams in 5A and 6A. Ben Russell going to have to go to Valley. I believe Valley is one of those that's in the Eastern time zone.
It is. It's right on the Georgia line. Matter of fact, I think part of Valley is actually in Georgia.
Yeah.
And if you ever go to Callaway Gardens, you have to go through there. That's the back way, so to speak, to get in there.
They joined our region when I was at Homewood my senior year, but it was at Homewood. So then the next year after I graduated, I remember my dad going to it to support Homewood, and it's like, yeah, they're in the Eastern time zone. That game started an hour.
It's a tough place to play. Let me tell you. There's some rough boys in Valley. They know how to play football.
Yeah, Valley will be at home as well in the playoffs, so they'll have 2 home games here back to back, and then we'll see what they can do in the Class 5A playoffs. All right, now all these games are going to be on Thursday. All those games I mentioned are going to be on Friday. A lot of games on Thursday in this final week of the season. It usually has to do with Halloween or, just end of the month, October stuff. There's some, you take off for parent-teacher conference day, you take off for Halloween, whatever it is. But for some reason, the whole season is shifted back. So it's this week, but still a lot of teams getting that extra day of rest, a lot of these playoff teams especially. But one big matchup, Pickens County and Marion County, want to throw that in there. That is for a playoff spot in that region, one of those regions that's going to continue on into the final week of the season. Jackson, unbeaten on the season, been really, really solid. One of the better overall teams in Alabama. 4A Region 1 winner against Davidson, a 7A team, but who is a playoff team. They snuck in that final spot in the playoffs over Foley. So we'll see if Jackson can beat Davidson on the road there. You mentioned it. I think they will too. You mentioned UMS Wright and how they have struggled this season. They are at Williamson. They have to win just to force a tiebreaker, which could put them in the playoffs. They have to get into a tiebreaker. Here's the interesting thing. I got to go back to whole AL Preps here, my own website, to look it up. So there's a lot of writing here for UMS Wright and how they could potentially make the playoffs. When there's a lot of writing, that means a lot has to happen. However, so it's Faith Academy, Viger, BC Rain, UMS Wright, all could potentially get into a tiebreaker. Viger's done. Faith Academy has LaFleur, who hadn't won a region game all year, should win that one. BC Rain has Gulf Shores, likely lose that one because Gulf Shores is Gulf Shores. They are unbeaten. Despite whatever's going on off the field right now, they are unbeaten. And then UMS Wright has Williamson. UMS Wright has to get into a tiebreaker with Viger, because if that happens, there's 4 teams going for 3 spots right now. If that happens, UMS Wright got a forfeit win over Viger after losing on the field earlier in the season. We talked about the Pell City forfeit. At the same time, they kind of snuck the Viger forfeit in there as well, right, to UMS Wright. So if that happens, UMS Wright has a win over TR Miller, who we just talked about. Been strong this season. They have 6 wins. Viger has Sidney Lanier remaining, who has 5 wins, so they could potentially jump up in that tiebreaker and tie UMS Wright, but it won't matter. And then Faith Academy, they have Jag, a win over them, which was, I can't remember, either Jeff Davis or Lee Montgomery. I forget which one's which. But that doesn't matter for them. So basically, got to get into a tiebreaker with Viger. You want to have it happen with them, or else UMS Wright will not make the playoffs. That's a very, very long-winded, complicated way to say UMS Wright could potentially miss the playoffs.
And I agree with that. All that, I mean, of course, all that's right. But UMS Wright probably, in all of that you said, beating Williamson is probably the easy part.
Probably so.
Yeah, the rest of it's got to happen, but I think they'll beat Williamson without any problem.
Yeah, Williamson sitting at 3-6. My projections put it out there as about a touchdown favorite for UMS Wright. BC Rain, like I mentioned, there at Gulf Shores. BC Rain likely in regardless, but if they win, it sends a message beating Gulf Shores, who's unbeaten on the season, putting them at 9-1 to finish the season, and then vaults you up in the playoffs as well to kind of let people know, hey, BC Rain's here to play. Viger. They are hosting Sidney Lanier, like I mentioned. Lanier at 5-4, Viger at 6-3. Like I mentioned, they need the win for tiebreak help. They could potentially fall out, but Lanier is a playoff team from 6A Region 2. They are the 4th seed, I believe. They're got Pike Road, Carver, Wetumpka, and Sidney Lanier. They're in 6A Region 2. 6A Region 3, Pelham, just missed. 7A Region 3, just missed. Spain Park, Pelham. This is a game of let's work on next year. And I know that doesn't mean a lot for the seniors that are on this team, but this is a game of so close, yet so far away. But next year could be a totally different story.
Yeah, I agree with you. But, gosh, that's just a good battle.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a real – we talked about Spain Park right now and how they've come on. For that reason alone, I think they'll handle Pelham without any problem. But Pelham put on a good fight.
Let's just say Spain Park at 6-3, Pelham at 5-4, Hoover at 4-6. The 4-6 team is the one of those three that's made the playoffs. Helena 8-1 at Vestavia 7-2. Two strong teams that faltered a little bit this season. Helena lost their first game against Ben Russell to lose their region championship, but I cannot wait for this one.
So, John, let me ask you this. If Helena beats Vestavia, is that good or bad for Vestavia? Will it make them mad enough to go into the playoffs in 7A, or will it knock them down and say, we shouldn't have lost that game? So this is a mind game to me.
It is. And look, I've been in this position that Helena's in, playing Vestavia in the final week of the season, in a game that doesn't actually count for anything other than your pride and kind of helping you steer the boat for the playoffs. I think Vestavia needs to win this game. I think Vestavia needs to go in and prove, because here's the thing. You have two losses, and that's Hewitt, which was a bad loss that we didn't expect to happen, and Thompson, a game that they could have won. And Thompson ended up pulling away late to make it 21-3, but it was 7-3 for a long time, and Vestavia had chances to win that game. Turn the ball over.
2 or 3 chances to go ahead of Thompson.
Yeah, they turned the ball over made Thompson turn the ball over multiple times. I mean, they have a chance right now to be undefeated. They kind of, didn't do much, kind of laid an egg against Hewitt Trustville, but they could have beaten Thompson, and that could have potentially caused a tiebreaker somewhere in there. Could have, because of the Spain Park loss to Hewitt Trustville, made Vestavia win the region had they won that, because they would have only had one loss at that point. All that to say, I think Vestavia needs to use this as we got to win. We got to prove that we're a team to be reckoned with, because guess what? In round 2, you get Thompson again. So that's one thing that Vestavia is kind of going to have in the back of their mind, but you need to go and beat Helena. Meanwhile, Helena, if we look at the 6A bracket, because they lost that region championship, they're going to drop to the 2nd seed. They would have hosted Sidney Lanier, and now they're hosting Wetumpka. If they beat Wetumpka, they're most likely going to have to play Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, which is a tough out in the playoffs there. Had they won the region, they'd have played Sidney Lanier, then they would have played likely Hueytown, which wouldn't have been nearly as bad as Hillcrest. So losing that game ended up costing them.
Yeah, and I will say, Vestavia's got a tough round 1 playoff game. We're going to talk about that next week, but looking ahead, they're going to play the Black Bears of Austin. Austin is a good football team.
They are hot right now. James Clemens, the region champ. So you got to think they might actually be the best team in the region despite struggling early on. And,
we'll see if this prediction is right. I'll predict if they beat Helena, they'll beat Austin. If they lose, I think they're going to go in that game a little bit gun shy. We'll see.
My prediction, and I've kind of thought this for the last couple of weeks, my prediction is 1 7A Region 4 team moves on to the next round. And it is Austin. It is not James Clemens. I think Hoover beats James Clemens in the first round. I think Hewitt Trustville beats Bob Jones. I think Thompson beats Florence, and I think Austin at home, being a big factor, beats Vestavia in the first round of the playoffs. That's the way I'm leaning now, because Austin's hot and James Clemens is kind of sort of on the decline. Hoover has kind of sort of figured things out a little bit. I mean, it was a 10-point game against Thompson, a game that should have been a blowout. They got a bunch of wins before that to ultimately qualify for the playoffs. maybe they've kind of sort of figured things out, but we'll see. But you're right. That probably is the toughest matchup of the first round.
I agree.
Vestavia taking on Austin. Gardendale, we mentioned them kind of sneaking into the playoffs. Started off with 0-5, 0-6 in the season.
Man, we thought they were gone.
We thought they were dead and gone, and they are in the playoffs at Hueytown. 2 playoff teams, but Region 4 and Region 5, so they're opposite ends of the bracket. One's in the north, one's in the south, and could be a good kind of stage setter right there. And then another game I had in here, Mountain Brook and Baker. Baker, the second seed out of 7A Region 1. Mountain Brook, the second seed out of 6A Region 5. Mountain Brook, very much a 7A team, playing in Region 3 for a long time. This could be a really good matchup of Central Alabama and South Alabama.
I agree. I think it's going to show what Mountain Brook's really got.
Yeah.
Because Baker's coming to play.
And Baker, too. So the way Mountain Brook is right now, they will host Buckhorn in the first round. Then they'll have to travel to Clay Chaltville. Yeah, Clay Chaltville Mountain Brook matchup in the second round of the playoffs. The winner of that one likely will get Muscle Shoals. And then on the other side, you got Parker looking strong, Oxford looking strong, Hartsville and as well. But Gardendale there in that quadrant, well, they'll play Gadsden City in the first round. Meanwhile, Baker, they did make the playoffs. They did get in there behind Marion Montgomery, who ended up winning your region championship. They will host likely Dothan, but it depends on that Region 2 tiebreaker, what happens. And then you get Central Phoenix City in the second round if you win. So congrats to Mountain Brook and Baker. I'm sorry, you're going to have impossible second round matchups, but it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. So regardless of what happens this week, most of the teams are set. Most of the matchups we said are set. Some are still kind of being played around with. I'll have it all at alpreps.com. A lot of games Thursday night. So Thursday night.
There's a lot of games this Thursday. And let me just tell you, we just found out today, first round playoff game for Thompson is on a Thursday night. So if you're a Thompson Warrior or a Falcon from Florence, be aware of that game. That playoff game is going to be on Thursday night, which I have no idea why they changed it.
Yeah, I don't either. But that game will be on the Warrior Nation Network. No Warrior Nation Network this week. We get to be off this week from calling games. So I'm going to sit back and watch football for the first time. I don't have to worry about working. I can sit back and watch football. And
I'm going to sit back and watch the Blue Angels.
Yeah, you're going to the beach.
I'm going down and watch the Blue Angels' final show of the year. You know, they fly all these shows all year. I've been a big Blue Angels fan all of my life. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be fun there. And Thursday night, anything that does happen, a lot of the Thursday games we just mentioned, some will affect the brackets. I'll update everything Thursday night at ALPreps on Twitter, alpreps.com, or JLuntz on Twitter as well. I kind of go back and forth where I post it, but it'll all be somewhere there. And then, of course, Friday night, we'll update everything. All the brackets will be made official by the AHSAA. Disclaimer, everything I have is unofficial as of right now, but hadn't hardly missed one yet. So, we'll see what it looks like on Friday night when the AHSAA ultimately gives their brackets out to the world, and then the playoffs start. The fun begins. Half the teams go home, half the teams move on, and then we'll cut it in half every single week until we get down to one champion in all 7 classifications. So, those are in Tuscaloosa, by the way, this year. For Jerry Young, I'm John Lunceford. It's the final week of the regular season. We'll be back next week talking playoffs right here on Next Round Preps.